Okay, I make it 7 o'clock, so I'm just going to crack on. The first few minutes are just some introductions, etc., and housekeeping. So first of all, thank you very much for coming. I'm Clare. I'm going to be hosting the event. I work for the Greater South East Energy Hub, but when I'm not doing that, I volunteer as a trustee member for Cambridge Carbon Footprint. And I do things like volunteer to host open eco homes events because I think it's a really wonderful project. So before we go into the meat of the or vegetarian alternative of the show, a few bits of housekeeping. Some of you may not have used Zoom before, so your controls will be at the top or bottom of the Zoom panel. And if you could just keep yourselves muted unless you're specifically asked to unmute, that would be great. So keep your little microphone crossed out. We do encourage you to ask questions. Just type in questions into the chat box. So again, there's a little speech bubble on your control panel. Tap in some questions, and we've got a few sessions for questions, and you'll be called upon to ask your questions in those. We welcome seeing you, but if you'd rather not appear, click off your Zoom camera. This is being recorded, and the slides, video recording and chat will be emailed to all of the attendees and everybody who booked on within the next few days. In terms of the timings for this session today, Margaret's going to take us through about 15 minutes of an overview of the site. And then we'll have 5 minutes, which are for questions specifically about the site. And then we've got a further 25 minutes, which is all about what they did to upgrade the site. So just to introduce you to Margaret, I think a few of you know her. If you've come to previous OEH events, you may well have seen her speaking on a variety of subjects. She's an architect in her own right and runs a successful architecture practice. And as I know myself, she's very busy. I would like her to help me on my home, and she's a very busy lady. And I will probably leave Margaret to tell you a bit more about herself, actually. So I will stop sharing and leave you to continue.
Good evening. A bit more about myself, just that I've been specializing in sustainable design since about 1999, and then I did a master's at Cambridge doing that. So this evening, I want to talk about the redevelopment of Downing Place United Reformed Church. I've been working on this since December 2016 in my spare time. So first will be a PowerPoint tour of video clips, hopefully for about 10 or 15 minutes. And second will be another longer PowerPoint with details of the strategy, the construction, and eco measures. And let me just share my screen now. One. Okay. Good. So first of all, let's do the tour of the building. Now, Tom Bragg and I made these video clips outside the buildings. I narrated the clips. And once we got in, we then made silent images for me to talk to in the webinar. And actually, we found that the videoed sound didn't work that well, so everything was going to be silent. So in the second bit will be the details of the strategy, the construction, and the eco measures. So here's our first clip. We're starting opposite the site in Downing Street. And the university museums are there. The Hilton Hotel is there. And then I'm pointing now to John Lewis. So it's the corner of Downing Place and Downing Street. And it is right in the center of Cambridge. Oops. Okay, sorry. Announcing our presence on Downing Street, we have an information screen. The doors, the old doors on Downing Street really are not used that much anymore. And so we used one of them to put in an information screen. And this is for people to, particularly who are coming out of John Lewis and waiting for the bus. This was shot on Wednesday, the 6th of October, when this concert was taking place. Okay. Around the corner in Downing Place, there's a new welcome entrance to the church sanctuary, and that's for special occasions, Sunday services, a Wednesday concert series, daytime, and special events like gowning for university graduations. The disabled access ramp was a critical part of our renovations, and this could not be done on the Downing Street side. Okay. So we're going to go from the new church entrance around the corner into the hall's entrance. This is where the weekday action mainly takes place, starting at the community facilities reception desk. Right. It was crucial to join up our Sunday and our weekday work. At the reception desk, one door to your left leads into the church. To the right, in front of you, is the new hub. And a sharp right is a discrete access upstairs to the NHS Group Therapy Center. So the hub is still in its early life, post-COVID, or at least we hope COVID is over. There are doors out to our inner garden, and food service and other activities are being organized for here really as we speak, still settling in. For a while, we felt like a flock of birds perched on our partner church, Emmanuel, on the Trumpington Street, while construction works went on here in the former St. Columba's site, and we have now flown back. And here's a sweep of around the garden, which is still in construction. That man is putting up another trellis from Coulson's. Gibson Hall, which I'm going into now. Seating 80 is actually one of the least changed spaces, except that the kitchen and the access hatch have been moved to make it a bit bigger. The roof had new insulation, and new roof lights with solar shading. The floor was able to be refinished with the same blocks, and an entirely new AV system was set up, paired with the church for conferences. On the other hand, here's the old St. Columba Hall. Our building group realized that we actually had more hall space and less small meeting space. And we actually had no central breakout mixing space for people to meet each other. Our architects, Archangel, created this new hub space by making half the former St. Columba Hall into small meeting rooms with a new mezzanine floor on the left. The servery, the links to the Gibson Hall, and access to our inner garden means that this space is available to anyone, and it's already very popular. After COVID, we will see what demand there is for our 4 small meeting rooms upstairs, and there's 4 downstairs as well. Okay, so back at reception, let's make a left-hand turn instead through the doors into the church. So this is still, again, this vast space in the church has been here since 1889, sorry, practically untouched. It was rarely used, except really on Sundays with the occasional midweek service or funeral. We now open it up daily to the community. Today, these fixed elements are gone. The front platform and much improved acoustics are now hosting several concerts a week. The new video screen permits the use of videos in the services and Zoom participation. Secondary glazing to the church stained glass windows allows the church to function as a sound studio, right, despite the traffic on Downing Street, as well, of course, as saving energy. The entire site was rewired, LED lights installed throughout, and we are still tallying this, but we anticipate large reductions in energy consumption, even when we're using it 7 days a week. Warm cell insulation, which is recycled newspaper, was blown above this church ceiling, and high-performance roof lights were built in for daylight and ventilation with solar shading. Note in the clip I'm going to show the view of street passers-by on Downing Street. They often look in. This old screen used to stand at the back, separating Downing Street entrance, those arriving from Downing Street entrances from the main seating area. Now it's a reminder of the past with 2 remaining pews and has been repurposed to house a smaller room called the Emmanuel Room, right off the street, that can be completely separated from activity in the main church space, by unfolding those white doors. This room is already used frequently by self-help groups like the Alcoholics Anonymous and for yoga sessions. And note at the center of the old screen, perfect symmetry, is the camera and the projector for live streaming. So thank you. That's the clips for the tour. Let's just take a break for questions or comments, and we'll move on then to the details of the eco retrofit.
So we haven't had any questions yet. If you would like to ask a question, you can put them in the chat now. Otherwise, if there aren't any questions, we could just move on to the second part and do all the questions at once.
I think it might be worthwhile pointing out, I don't think it's been said yet, and perhaps I should have said that in my introduction. Although Margaret is an architect, it was a separate set of architects that actually did this build. Margaret was actually the client in this particular occasion, and I think her church were very happy to have her on board to help with that.
Last year we did a review of the design and the construction, and the architects, they're Archangel and they're in Histon, and they specialize in churches. They talked about how that was going to work and showed their model. Let me just get this up.
So we've just had a question from Tom asking whether there are now 2 congregations in the church.
Right. Just a minute. Thank you. No, I'm going to talk about that. It is a complicated story here, and I hadn't really gone into any of that detail. But no, the first thing that happened was that 2 congregations joined, and we sold the site of Emmanuel Church in Trumpington Street, and that is what gave us our budget for this, for the renovation. And somebody says, you mentioned a ramp. What else was done for disabled? I will go through that. We put in a lift. We have Braille on the signs. We've looked very carefully at the contrasts for people who are visually have diminished visual acuity. And we've tried, and there's also, you'll see a lift in the sanctuary because there's a platform that rises up. Okay, so shall I start now on the second? Any other comments?
I think that was everything.
Okay. Right. So there's no videos here, so I'm not quite so it's not quite so awkward to do. Right, the second PowerPoint is going to look at our strategy, the construction, and eco measures. So roughly that will be what was there, what did we do as of this autumn, because we ain't finished yet, and how we did it, particularly the low carbon measures. So again, what was there? Our site included the church, on the left here, 2 halls, which you entered by that gate, and the caretaker's house, which is in the courtyard. So it was actually 4 separate buildings with linking corridors. And by the way, the caretaker's flat is now in the rear upstairs, and this little house has become group therapy upstairs above the toilets. You can see on this plan, the photo, the zigzag of the route. So here's the church building, there's Downing Street along here, Downing Place here, and there's the church building starts this angle. Then you go right angle to the old St. Columba's Hall and another right angle to the Gibson Hall. Our site is surrounded by large city center features. So we have the Hilton Hotel, as I said, there, Lion Yard Car Park, Access, I believe it is, and John Lewis, Drummer Street Bus Station, Emmanuel College. Downing College is down here. Opposite is the University Museums of Geology and Anthropology. And at the very far end of Downing Place is actually the University Downing Sciences site. Closer in, we are ringed by some of the hottest nightlife attractions in the city. That is before COVID. So we have Vodka Revolution, Nando's, the Varsity, and the massive Weatherspoons art cinema complex, which literally encircle us. At the start of our redevelopment campaign, we were entertaining, if you said, like night revelers 10 deep on the pavements. We don't know exactly what the future holds, but they do seem to be coming back already. And a note here, if anyone wants to volunteer for our nightlight street passers duty, Fridays and Saturdays till 4 a.m., please let me know. So as I say, this church sanctuary had untouched 1880s vintage woodwork, fixed screens, fixed pews. The large St. Columba and the small Gibson Hall were classic late Victorian. As we started our campaign, these halls were also fully booked with outside activity every evening. Funding application listed 1,000 members of the community using the halls every week. So here's the plan inside. This shows how the zigzag of buildings is now redeveloped. So on the left, we've got the church, seating 220, the Emmanuel room, the smaller Emmanuel room, which seats another 40. And of course, these two spaces were joined in the photo. And this is a glass folding doors that come across to separate them. There's the new welcome entry, which we didn't really see. Small red arrow. And that actually formed a one-way system in and then out again, which was quite useful during the pandemic. Now, the main entry is through the gates and in here, shown by the large red arrow from the Downing Place courtyard into the new hub, linking the servery, the kitchen, catering kitchen, the Gibson Hall, and the garden. And of course, if you were back here to your left, it's the church. As we have seen, the hub also leads to 4 small meeting rooms on the ground floor, sorry, down here, and 4 more meeting rooms on the first floor, in addition to the group therapy center here, which has one of the meeting rooms. So before we go on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about our development strategy. A low carbon development strategy is a very sophisticated piece of work. It has to take into account the historic and aesthetics of the building, energy baselines, benchmarks, targets, the U values of the construction, heating, cooling, airtightness calculations. You've got to have team competences. The building group, which is what I was on, the central client committee, has to talk to the architects and say what we want. The architects have to talk to the consultants. The consultants have to know how to do it. And then the consultants have to get the contractor to produce something that is of the right price and that satisfies the requirements. So basically, our strategy was to unite 2 different church congregations. That's Emmanuel from Trumpington Street and the old St. Columba's on this site. And 2, to use the £5 million sale money from the Emmanuel site to fund some kind of redevelopment of the St. Columba's site. 3, we had to agree. There were between 200 of us church members what to do and how much to spend. And 4, we needed to move quickly because we were offered accommodation in the old Emmanuel site after the sale, right up for 2 years until September 2020. So we really had to move fast. So it wasn't until the interviews of our short list of architects that the subject of sustainability even came up. And this was a quick remark at a meeting to prepare for architect interview session. I was on the building group, and as a member of the church, obviously, and as an architect, and I minuted this suggestion. Whenever possible, the most sustainable route should be pursued, and that's to be added to the requirements we're giving to the architect. TBC, when and how to do this. So that went into the minutes, and the answer, which was spoken verbally, was, Margaret, we hope you will show us how to do this. And this had come about because that grant application, which was successful with Amy Cespa, had given them St. Columba's money to repair and completely re-roof the church. But it didn't cover insulation. It wasn't, I don't believe, asked to cover insulation, and they felt they hadn't thought the whole sustainability question through at that point. And so they wanted to bring it in now. After the architects were appointed, therefore, for me, it was like the starting gun for a race. Along the way, my attempt to get a low carbon expert mechanical and electrical consultants resulted in their fee bid being triple the bid of the firm that actually received the commission. First thing I did was to set out how our buildings could be made sustainable. And I circulated an 8-page document in February 2018, but only to my building group. I had to have them on my side. You can see the summary: baseline, use now, targets, carbon footprint, major opportunity, which it was. It was only after we had a laser survey done of the buildings, once the architects had base drawings and started working up possible design strategies, that second, we actually circulated this paper, a revised version, to the architects in May 2018, and they'd been working on the project by then for 5 months. In the paper, I made these points. There are 3 different ways to lower emissions. You can do fabric, mechanical and electrical services, and renewables. And in fabric, we could do roof insulation, wall insulation, floor insulation. We could look at the openings, so the windows, replace windows and put in roof lights. And I said, any new construction will be airtight to reduce leakage from drafts. And to prevent summer overheating, which would require cooling, roof lights will have external solar shading, which cuts out the heat from the sunlight, the direct sunlight. And then I said, here's how we will measure our progress. We will establish a baseline, and that was simple, of course. You just tally 2 years of gas and electricity bills for 4 buildings and try to establish which spaces the meters actually cover. We were doing this to bill some of our tenants, so it wasn't that hard. So I did this to get the kilowatt hours per year. And I got the meters squared from the new survey drawings. So I had kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. This is a metric that can be compared to benchmarks. So I said, in 2012, the Church of England audited the energy use of its properties, and that was 12,000 churches, 1,600 halls, and established benchmarks for typical usage. By comparing our kilowatt hours per meter squared per year to their audit, we were actually rather alarmed to discover that our usage has been quite high. Our halls were using 80% more than the average for Church of England church halls. So we were using 206 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year, and the benchmark was 115. Our church was using more than double the average energy for Church of England small and medium churches. We were using 336 kilowatt hours per meter square, and the benchmark was 150. So after the scheme had been designed, the contractors were brought on board to produce a negotiated contract. The scheme was costed by our quantity surveyor, and everything was presented to all the church members in July 2018, and then again presented to small groups of members. So in November 2018, we voted, and it went through, on expenditure up to 5 million while continually seeking reductions. At that point, I actually tried to make my continued participation in building group contingent on the inclusion of these low carbon measures. Fortunately, no one challenged this because I'm not sure I would actually have left. The consultants were then appointed in January by competitive fee bids. So we had structural, of course, mechanical, electrical. We had vast number of party walls. We had to have a party wall surveyor. We had a legal person for all the different contracts. We had a kitchen advisor. We had IT advisor. We had audiovisual advisor. The documents to the contractors for the negotiated tender got to the contractors for the negotiated tender by the end of March, and we had a price from them by May. The consultants really only had 3 months to design everything. A second vote by the church meeting on June 2019 on the scheme and the costings. It was at that point that I was invited to describe to church members the sustainable measures that we proposed. Everything was well received, and we had a 2/3 majority. So I sent this list of sustainable measures to the architects, and I simply prayed. The only way I could check if they had actually included them was to read through the 10,469 items in the tender bill of quantity, which I did. Even then, I had not yet realized that the architects assumed, and most people assume, that simply meeting building regs was building regulations was a high enough standard of insulation. Okay, there's much more I could say about all this, but I'd like to stop and flag up the huge importance of somehow all of us being ready to pick up quickly on a chance remark like this, to show governing members of an organization that we're in part of, or institution, some quick steps to becoming more energy efficient in this climate emergency. Renovations, redevelopment, repairs, and maintenance. These frequently offer trigger points like this. Energy retrofit campaigning must be more attuned to opportunities presented by these trigger points. And by the same token, the industry, all these small firms which provide repairs, improvements, maintenance, must be trained, ready to offer a green agenda as well. You want your roof repaired? Why don't we extend the eaves so you can cover your external wall insulation? Okay, so I want to go through now what we did and how we did it. So we've seen that for the church outside, we added new windows on Downing Street. You can see them here. Disabled access and a new welcome area on the Downing Place side. Inside, the hub was opened up with new roof lights to form a hub area. St. Columba's Hall was opened up with new roof lights to form a hub area, catering kitchen with a mezzanine of small rooms and views of the courtyard garden. So I've been asked now to talk a little bit about the roof lights. We have external blinds on these. A big concern for meeting spaces is ventilation and overheating. And that was even before COVID. Obviously now, we needed to keep the spaces cool and well ventilated. And an interesting way to screen out, direct sun is by suspending fabric outside the opening. This has actually been readily available for roof windows for some years. Velux or Facro awning blinds only transmit some 4% to 14% of solar heat. The blinds stop the heat reaching the glass, and they still provide light and a reasonable view out. So here's the roof light without the blind. Here's the roof light open with the blind hooked into place. Once it's closed, you can see right through it. So more or less the same view, and all the heat, a serious amount of heat, is cut out. Maintenance under the wear and tear of wind loading, rain, and grime presents significantly greater problems with external blinds compared to internal ones. But these particular fabric awnings are stored in a metal cassette, at the top of the roof window. They're extended into place at the beginning of hot weather, and they're left there until the autumn. And then you have to remember now, take them back in. In the cassette, they stay cleaner and they're less subject to wear and tear. Another thing we did was this garden. We were able to convince people not to get rid of the exquisite diagonal wooden screens in the front of the church. These are shown on the left before the works began. Instead, we installed them in the garden to be used as plant trellises. So the center is a drawing of the future garden with all of these plants fully grown. Now, far from being forgotten, the screen in the garden was actually used for the cover of the church magazine, which is this picture here. And on the bottom left was the view last Tuesday when I was on site. Now, we had a sustainability service last January before the building handover. In this, we'd asked for sponsors for shrubs or climbers from our planting scheme to represent our promise to look after the natural world. In fact, all the plants, equipment, even the bird table has been given by members. The wood screen in its outdoor home has become a symbol of new from old. Inside the church, we opened up the space with daylighting, new lights, IT and AV, and made it work as a concert hall during the week. A digital organ has replaced the old one, and the space has become the link between the church and the halls. We are now hosting several concerts and music events a week, in addition to our Wednesday daytime concert series. Archangel architects were appointed in January for feasibility work stage A only. Their appointment was continued once a priced design scheme was delivered in November 2018. So here's Jack Boynes on the left, talented young project architect, and in his hand is his tablet on which he can show the 3D design of the entire building. This was built up from the laser survey, and this 3D model showed all of us what it would be like inside the renovations once they were done. And this was extremely useful on site to keep track of services, finishes, furniture, the overall design. And I have to say, walking church members through this 3D model on a screen clearly helped achieve the 2/3 majority for the project in June 2019. So how we did it. It's not really rocket science. You can see there all the Gibson Hall roofs rebuilt with high performance roof lights and insulation. One of many shots of the mezzanine. You can see here, early days, the steel framework on the left for the new floor, containing the corridor and the small meeting rooms. And to the right, the link corridor way over here has been rebuilt with half of the hall to make our hub. This is the roof of the hub, huge roof, rebuilt with insulation, high performance roof lights, and solar photovoltaic panels. Above the church ceiling, beautiful boarded ceiling, we have warm cell insulation. That's recycled newspaper that was blown in. And we were concerned about the cost of this ceiling insulation, but it was able to be done by London Insulation for £16,000. And it's 300 millimeters thick, so quite useful. On the left, hub roof lights for daylight, ventilation, and solar shading. And on the right, secondary glazing in the church. And you can just make out here this Y shape, which is the mullions. It was a very good, very well done. In terms of the mechanical, we have efficient gas boilers, 2 for the church on the left 2 for the hub and halls in the basement in the middle there. And ventilation being key, we have various new types, including for the catering kitchen. These have user-friendly controls, and some of them include heat recovery. On the roof ridge of the new hub roof, we have 16 photovoltaic panels, about 15 kilowatt peak, 5 kilowatt peak, excuse me, and wiring and space for a battery in the basement. We're waiting to see how much evening usage is reinstated after COVID, because that could be quite useful. We've changed suppliers, Scottish Power as 100% renewable electricity, and Crown 100% carbon offset renewable gas. Someone is asking about disability. We needed a disabled lift in the church to go up those 2 steps. We decided to make it into a piano lift as well, so we could take people or pianos up and down, and it disappears when it's not needed. And then we also have on the right there the lift in the hub that goes up to the mezzanine. Other measures on the right, the mezzanine is used to distribute electricity, heating, water, audiovisual, IT, energy, and monitoring information. So that all goes on the new balcony floor, if you like. And on the left, a photo of the wiring showing the quantity of purple IT wiring that went in. We have excellent Wi-Fi and screens everywhere. Most impressive. So we did a lot, and it was expensive, and we could have done more. We did not insulate the floors. There was no air tightness testing. We did not install heat pumps with boreholes. There are more places for more photovoltaic panels if the planners are willing. But there were some major victories. We did the church ceiling, the secondary glazing, triple glazed roof lights, external solar awnings, and these work. They keep it cool. We have insulation everywhere and triple glazing to the new welcome entrance. In terms of energy, with solar PVs and wiring, space for a battery. We've discussed the possibility of running an EV in some way. In fact, we had EV chargers in the contract, but we took them out because we didn't want too much parking in our courtyard. We've got new suppliers from renewable sources, and in a few months, I will have a go again at the utility bills and see what the annual electricity and gas usage is. But I would say the most successful thing was hearts and minds. Our contractors had the site estimator had never seen a solar photovoltaic panel before. He was promoted and has told me that the small group works part of the company, that's Coulson's building group, is going to qualify for past 2035 retrofitting. The sustainability service we held in January linked up our vegan young people with old folks. Some even remember war rationing. We were able to emphasize the duty of stewardship, and we dedicated the garden. In February, we had a sustainability brainstorm. 25 people came forward who were unaware that the others were interested, looking for ways to show outside users how a sustainable community center is run. In March, we formed a sustainability group. The leader is now a church elder, and turns out he was a member of the Green Party. In April, we had a unanimous vote for eco-church registration. And as far as the energy results go, watch this space. I will be tallying the bills in April when we've been in the buildings for a year. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions or comments.
Okay, we haven't got many questions at the moment, but I just wanted to check before we go into questions. Hermione, did that answer what you wanted to know about secondary glazing and roof lights, or did you have any other questions? You can unmute yourself if you like.
Thank you. Sorry, now I've actually got some more details. I've just put on the chat. What a great presentation. Thank you very much indeed. I'm really interested in the stained glass windows. We happen to have a stained glass window and I really want to know what to do with it. So what was the frame made of? I can't even see the frame in your photos. Oh, marvelous. Yeah. Is it double or triple? Have you got low E? What are the spaces? Do they open? Is there anything on the outside? How are you going to clean them in the long run on the inside?
So let's see.
Everything in other words.
They are metal frame, single glass. They do not open. I believe there are ways to get inside there to clean, but they don't open as a rule. We do have openable stained glass windows, and we did not try to connect those in to the secondary glazing. We just simply close them. What were some of the other questions?
Is it low E on the inside, so you're actually getting some heat returned into the building?
We're getting heat. So heat returned into the building.
From the glazing. I mean, just from the low E glass, because I forget which one it is, but one of those big ones is actually doing low E secondary glazing now.
I don't believe this is Selecta glaze, and they were very concerned with the aesthetics of it and to making it soundproof as well as low energy. I do not believe that is low E reflective glass. I think it's just plain glass to make it as clear as possible to see the stained glass.
Yeah, and is there anything on the outside, whether it's for protection of the glass or for additional heat?
That's interesting. I don't think I have it in a picture. There, some of the lowest windows have some protection on the outside. Some of the old stained glass windows in the best. But otherwise, no, there's nothing outside.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and Tom, you had a question about heat pumps?
Thank you. So I was just going to say, when I came to do videoing with Margaret, I was really inspired, impressed by this church transformation. It's just a lovely building. But I wanted to ask Margaret, so was there any serious consideration given to using heat pumps for the heating?
Yes, it was. I did a lot of research and really kept after our mechanical and electrical engineers to get a feasibility study for a heat pump. And I went as far as asking some other people about a ground source heat pump and a borehole. But the consultants who we got were not at all impressed with my asking someone else about a ground source heat pump. And this really, they meant it to stop me cold, and it did. Most unfortunate. We could not get any study of anything about the possibility of a heat pump. Everyone discounted it as impossible. And I think you have to take into account that they were hired in January and they had to produce the scheme by March. You know, in retrospect, had we known there was going to be COVID and the whole thing would be delayed 10 weeks, and then would be much later than the September 2020 deadline, we might have been advised to take a little more time over that. But at the way that the timing worked out, they simply were not going to consider it. And I was deeply upset about that, I can tell you. But because I just knew we needed to get a heat pump in there, at least in the halls where we were rebuilding the roof and a lot of the walls and putting in new windows. I didn't think it would work in the church because there's almost nothing we could do to the walls there, except we did renew all the plastering, which was lime to help with damp. But there was no way I could see that we could insulate those walls, and we weren't touching the floor. So it would have been a lot of work for that heat pump to, and I mean, you just know the price of a borehole, what, 20,000 maybe? Then the heat pumps too, more, and that's in the city center. We do have room to drill however many boreholes we would need, but you know, it was a very long stretch and it just wasn't going to happen.
Okay, we've got a question from Nick about the Eco Church Award. Did you want to ask a question, Nick? No. Okay, wait, Nick was just asking what level you got to.
Yes, the Eco Church Award is a very useful kind of a Duke of Edinburgh type thing, where you start off bronze, and the incentive to get silver and then gold means that a lot of people pull the stops out. It's very useful. There are five, I believe it's 5 categories, and we come out differently on the different categories. So building, we're silver, community, service content, we're already gold, land, we're still bronze, and I think on lifestyle, we're still bronze. So we're working at it. It wouldn't have been any good to have gone straight into gold anyway, because we need incentives. We're certainly not green enough as a congregation. There's much more we can do in our own lifestyles. The award is run by the Arocha Society. I think I will make sure you have the, I think you've got the link, Alice, do you not?
I think it's in the case study. I can find it and post it in the chat. That's fine.
It's excellent. They have all kinds of related events and conferences where you can meet other churches and see what other people are doing. And there's support for particular things that you need to be doing where you're lacking, you're not up to gold yet.
Great. And we've got a question from Sheila about air tightness. Did you want to unmute and ask your question, Sheila?
Okay. Yes, you said that air tightness was one of the criteria when you were considering the ventilation systems. And I wonder whether that's changed now with what we know about the importance of good ventilation, you know, during COVID and probably post-COVID for a long time. How do you balance those two things?
That is a really excellent question, because air tightness is an energy saving measure. It never goes into a building without the ventilation being increased to complement it. So if you control the air that's leaking out, then you can feed in fresh air that is where you want it and when you want it. So the two things are not, they don't contradict each other. And you may be worrying about air being blown around in COVID. It's airtight. I know I don't have expert advice on this, but there is any ventilation equipment has filters. Filters can be changed, and you really do need, in any case, to be moving the air around in a building. Air tightness it does not preclude good ventilation. They're two different things.
Okay.
One is geared to the other.
Yeah, right.
Just having a drafty building and saying, well, this is better for COVID, I think is not really the solution. The solution is to have better ventilation. And if you're worried about contamination, then you look at your filters and you change them more often.
Yes. May I ask a supplementary question about whether you considered your water use in the building?
We recycle the rainwater for the garden.
Yeah.
I need to double check this, but we asked for sustainable toilets and taps and things. And again, I need to double check that they actually went in, but that's what certainly was our intention.
Yeah, but nothing radical like a grey water system.
No, I mean, the water is kitchen, toilets, and the caretaker side is a different thing. That is actually a residence, and that has a whole different equipment and kit. As far as the church itself, and I believe you are at St. Giles, am I right?
Well, I'm the parish administrator for the
Yeah.
Ascension Parish. So we have 3 Victorian buildings to consider. St. Augustine's has had quite a big upgrade, but the other 2 are still. We joined Eco Church for all 3, so we're making our way in that direction.
Yes, that's a good route for it. In terms of the water usage, that's not something at the moment that I have down to check, but it is very important. And in Cambridge, we really do need to watch this because the situation is getting more difficult here, partly because we need to keep the fens wetter in dry periods because they emit methane. So there are things that we haven't really taken into account in our area, which are critically important. And so we should be looking more at water use.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Margaret.
I'm just going to interrupt there because we're getting close to 8 o'clock. We can continue having a chat. I think there's a few remaining questions still to be answered. Margaret's already indicated to us that she's happy to stay on an extra 10 minutes or so, but I'm conscious that other people may have other places that they need to get to. So I just wanted to cover a few last slides just to wrap things up, and then if people need to go, they can head off, and those that want to continue to chat are welcome to do so. So just a few quick requests from us. We'd really appreciate it if you would follow the links. You'll be sent all of these slides and you'll be able to click on the links within them. We'd really appreciate it if you could give us some feedback. It helps us to develop next year's series of Open Eco Homes tours. So if you could let us know, what's been really interesting, what you'd like to see more of, perhaps some of your barriers, that sort of thing, that sort of information lets us develop an even better programme for next year. If you could also consider making a donation if you're able to. Lots of you maybe have already been to other tours, so thank you if you've already made a donation. We suggest somewhere around £5, but every little helps really. We do rely on donations to continue our work, such as Open Eco Homes. And please feel free to share on social media, let people know that you've attended our events, that you've enjoyed our events, more are available, etc. And thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your support. But for the last slide, we really wanted to talk about kind of what else you can do, what the next step is, because that's really what we're here for, is to try and support you through information to encourage you to take the next steps in your own home, or perhaps your own church or your own business. So some of the things that you can do towards that end, you can book another tour or a talk, although we are actually coming to the end of our season. So there's only one tour left, which is tomorrow. I'll just tell you a quick bit about that. That's a DIY 1960s house and retrofit. Wookie is the host, and he began work in 2007. He's taken a phased approach with the aim of completing by 2025. They're aiming to reach EnerFit certification, which is not one I've come across. I meant to ask Margaret how to pronounce that actually, but anyway, it's a quality approved energy retrofit with passive house components. And it sounds like a really great opportunity to hear about the pros and cons of a longer term DIY retrofit, which takes a phased approach. If you are thinking about retrofitting your home, there's a toolkit that you can use if you click on the Get Started with Your Retrofit link, which is on this page. And that includes things like kind of quick and easy wins, but also looks at kind of longer term strategies, whether you want to phase your approach and take a DIY approach, or whether you want to kind of look at employing an architect and do it all in one go. It talks about the different options and gives you some sort of tips for how to get started with that. You can also find lots more case studies. I think I had a look yesterday at the website, this link that you're taken to. We've got 63 different case studies on our website. So whatever you're interested in, we've probably got a case study that tells you a bit about it. You can also borrow a thermal imaging camera and get training. We're hoping to start training around mid-November. The training dates aren't released yet, but watch this space and they should be released soon. And once you've been trained, you can borrow a thermal imaging camera for free. We do encourage donations, but that is voluntary. You can also use Transitions Cambridge's personalised home energy advice tool. That can give you some more tips and advice. And you also may wish to take political action with things like households declare and their resources, or perhaps the church focus one, which has been posted in the links. And I think that's everything, other than to say thank you so much to Margaret for once again giving us a really informative and interesting tour. And thank you so much to everybody for coming along and attending today. If you do need to get off, please feel free to go about your evenings. But for anybody that wants to stay, I'm going to stop sharing and we can have a bit more question time and a bit more of an informal chat. Thank you.
Great, thanks Claire. So we've got a few more questions. Before we get back into the questions though, I just wanted to share a bit of feedback from Nicole, who's not able to unmute at the moment, but she wanted to share her thoughts. She says, what a wonderful, comprehensive, beautiful project. I really hope it inspires even more people to renovate in the most sustainable way possible. You have certainly proved it is possible. Thank you, Margaret. Okay, so similar to what we were talking about just before we paused for the closing slides, Nick asked, they asked about the rainwater harvesting, which I think you've pretty much answered, but the question was, did you look into solar water heating or rainwater harvesting?
Yes, we did. Solar water heating, there's hot water in the flat, which is a separate system, but we have a shower because we feel that there may be homeless people who need it, but really our usage of hot water is not the same as for a residential building. So we didn't consider solar hot water. I mean, basically, I have not used it, and so what I didn't know didn't get asked for. I wondered if we could ask Robert to comment. Robert, you were willing to say anything? Need to unmute, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is that the important thing is that the work is not done. We're going to continue to look at ways of improving our carbon footprint and saving energy. You know, Margaret mentioned the fact that we've got the solar panels, but we haven't yet got batteries, which means we can store the electricity and use it at different times of day and so on. And that's probably because the battery technology, well, from what Margaret said, it's going to be there in a couple of years' time, isn't it? When it's worth doing. But we got all the connections there ready for it. So we are still planning for the future. And for my sins, I'm now in charge of the group that's taking over from the building group once all the snagging is finished in April, May next year, the property management group. And that will certainly be a regular thing on our agenda. You know, review every so often, are the things that we can still do to improve our performance in terms of energy and carbon footprint. I think it's really, really important. I suppose the other thing to say is we were, as it were, converting a Victorian building, and that has all sorts of problems. I mean, the walls of the church itself were about nearly a metre thick, weren't they, in some parts?
Yeah.
No downforce or anything like that. There are certain constraints. We didn't want to spoil the beauty of the building, particularly the sanctuary area. There were some things that just weren't possible to do. But I think one of the biggest improvements in the sanctuary, in the church itself, has been the additional windows for bringing light in, but also the windows right in the roof, which enable us to cool the place, particularly in summer. It has made a huge difference. You know, within 5 minutes of those things being open, you can feel the temperature go down in the summer. It's quite remarkable. So things which, you know, people might not even notice these things in the ceiling, but they really do have a big impact and help us manage the way we control temperature in the place. So no, I mean, I think we've been blessed by having Margaret on the client team, as it were. I'm sure she gave some of the architects and contractors not an easy time, but we need to be challenging. And I'm glad to say that Margaret's approach has had the full-hearted support of everyone at the church meetings, because the URC church is a very democratic church, and these decisions have to be taken at church meetings. So yes. I think it's gone really very well. I'm very pleased, and visually it's stunning to look at as well.
I think I would just say on the church roof that we were mystified that in the summer of 2018, there was a 6-week heat wave. And at 9 o'clock at night, in the bottom, so the 3 stories down from the roof, if you like, it was 32 degrees. Yeah. And we thought, how can it be so hot at nighttime?
Yeah.
And I have to say, I had discussions with certain consultants who were, should have probably known better. If you have tiles, they absorb that solar radiation and they radiate it in all directions. And although heat rises, radiated heat can go down. And it was that hot up there with no insulation at all under the roof tiles. It was heating down 3 stories. And it doesn't do that. I mean, we haven't had the same heat wave, but it's cool in there. The heat comes from people in there, and we open those roof lights, which I think look fine. But it was, again, quite a shock to think we were going to put those in. And it lets all the heat out because all the heat comes up that curve and then just goes straight out. So those are simple things that, and as long as the remote control system keeps working, we're fine.
Great. All right, so on a slightly different topic, we've got a question from Paul about the panels that went out into the garden. Did you want to unmute and ask your question, Paul? Otherwise, I can read it out for you.
Yeah, sure. I think you said at the, I'm sorry, I actually got very poor connections, so I haven't heard all of it. But I thought I heard that the tracery panels were about 1840. Now they, I suspect, were pitch pine, and I suspect that they will have settled with the environment of the inside of the building for a number of years. To take them outside, have you treated them in some way?
Okay, so let's just say there was a screen there originally, Robert, correct me now, that was dedicated by Herbert Coulson, of all people. They have, the builders actually have a connection with the church. That screen was replaced. So the building was open about 1889. There was already a screen there. And so these are newer than 1889. Yeah. And second, Coulson's Joinery, who just love all that, they're definitely oak. And we reckon, and they are massive, 6 by 6, 6-inch by 6-inch pieces and posts and things, beautifully carved. And I just could not bring myself to agree that we should just sell these things or put them in some, you know, architectural salvage. We put the one of them outside in, I'm forgetting now, something like maybe February, I think, something like that. And already it's doing what I hoped it would do. We did not touch the finish. We believe they were probably waxed or something. But we put them outside, and the one that's been out there now for roughly 6 months is starting to silver, as oak does in half timber buildings. So that the prominent bits of the carving are going lighter, and there's sort of still oil or whatever in the shadows. Perfect. So, you know, I don't know what's going to happen to these. Some of them may have varnish on them. We don't think so. It looks like just wax. And we'll just see what happens to them. But I think like a lich gate or something, as a silvered oak is gorgeous. And I mean, I don't know. We hope they won't streak in the rain, but we're keeping the little, I mean, they were built for inside, but they have cornices which provide a drip so that the rain misses, it drops down, but it misses the front surface of most of the screen. So I think the bleaching will be from sun, and there's not a whole lot of sun in that courtyard. And I have to say, I did take a picture. When you first went out into that courtyard, what you saw was 6 stories up, a whole load of pigeon spikes set into the wall. Because the screens are so stunning, you never even look up now. You're still trying to figure out where the mirrors are and things. So it used to look like a prison yard, but now we've got so much going on that we've stopped anybody looking up.
Okay, that seems to assuage my fears about the pine going outside.
Do come and I fully respect. I asked all the joiners, and everybody seems to feel that we're onto a good thing there, that however they weather, they're tough as nails. Oak is, you know, that massive size of oak should be okay. But come and see.
I think, you know, I have enjoyed the tutorial and the seminar tonight, and I really would like to come and see the building. I don't get into Cambridge all that often, but I'll make a point of actually coming in, because
All
it does
right,
stunning.
Robert comes and goes by bus. I come by bike, but it's quite handy for public transport.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Great. And then we had another question from Nick about what, it's a slightly different topic, but you might be able to answer, Margaret, or Claire might potentially. Are there any grants available for stuff like this for low-income households? So talking about the Green Homes grant, but if there's anything similar now.
It is my understanding that if the government, okay, I'm not going to be political here. If the government gets organized, we are going to have a different kind of Green Homes grant, and we're going to have a new low carbon heating grant to replace the renewable heat incentive. I don't know when. We had a bad time with the Green Deal. The Green Homes grant died a death almost within a year. I mean, it was even a year. It's desperately needed. Other countries have done it. In fact, in Massachusetts, they take, there's the energy company obligation, but it's expanded much more widely. In Northern Ireland, beg your pardon, they do that too. So that there's funding that people can apply for, and it has to be up to a certain standard, which the standard has now been set up, which is called Publicly Available Specification 2035, which is usually called PASS 2035, and that's to protect local authority housing and things when you're doing massive jobs of retrofit, which are being done now. And so local authorities require that standard, but the whole business of standards and helping people to do retrofit is in theory going to be built up. I hope so.
I can elaborate slightly on that as well.
Yes, I mean, we hope Cambridge Carbon Footprint and Open Eco Homes, we right in the forefront telling you as soon as we've got anything to tell.
So the Greater Southeast Energy Hub actually are supporting LAD2, which is local authority delivery of essentially government grant funding, but it really is for very low income households. So when you're saying low income, it's either for people on benefits or for let me think. So it's £30,000 or less combined household income. So, you know, if you've got more than 2 adults in the household, or if you've got more than 1 adult, you know, it's a combined income, or if you've got less than £20,000 post kind of your bills, essentially your fuel and mortgage, etc. payments, then you can get this LAD grant. They're still working on LAD 1B actually, and LAD 2 will come into effect soon. So it is very stringent criteria, and for most local authorities, they will get in touch with you. It's not a question of kind of just everybody try and bundle in and get what you can. In most cases, it's going to social housing, or they've got kind of tenants who they know are in need. It's very much specifically looking at a worst first approach as well. So it's for properties where their kind of EPCs, their energy performance certificates, are D, E, F, G. So, you know, if you've got a reasonable house, you might not even qualify for it. So it is quite tight criteria, but I would echo what Margaret said. There's desperate needs for something else like the Green Homes Grant. Something that I'm looking at is kind of supporting the able to pay market, and trying to see what more local authorities can do. And it's very patchy, I would say. You know, some authorities are doing more than others. Some places, like obviously Cambridge City Council, is supporting Open Eco Homes. That's one of the things that they're doing. Other councils do offer some support for the able to pay market. There's Solar Together, is a kind of bulk buying PV scheme that several councils locally have supported, and actually more local authorities are looking at taking that up as well. So yeah, I hope more is to come though. I really do think it's needed, especially if we're looking at this target of carbon neutrality by 2050.
The government's only position at the moment has to do with fuel poverty and people on benefit, as Claire says, which of course is terribly important. I think there may be some kind of aided borrowing, so that I mean, for the renewable heat incentive, you have to have the money up front, and then you get 7 years of quarterly payments. A lot of people don't have that, and it's going to be very important for people to research what they can do. This new past 2035 also includes shorter little exercises where you look at your house, you look at several measures, and you say, this measure is going to take you this long to pay back in terms of fuel savings, whereas this one will be quicker. So it'll help you, you know, decide which ones to do if you want to spread them out. It also tells you which ones save more carbon. That's something you can look at, but the money to do the work, and it's considerable. We really need some kind of subsidies and loans, or we won't make these targets. And I hope maybe COP26 is going to force some action.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've pretty much reached the end of the questions. Claire, you mentioned about the baseline data. I don't have the link, but Margaret will.
Was that a website that you got that information from, or where was that you got that information from? So it's actually, I shouldn't have said baseline data, the kind of data, the benchmarking, that's the word. There we go.
That's
yeah.
a really useful tool. I don't know whether people quite took it in, but I was able to say, you know, we're way above average. That seemed to me to justify what I was doing. Whether anybody else understood it, I don't know. But the Church of England is very active in this. They did this audit and they have not stopped working, encouraging, and they have so many churches, a lot of them very old too, needing specialist development work and retrofitting, restoration. But they are a very good source. They have a whole, I'm not going to be able to remember this, I'll try and find it and send it to Alice, a whole website. It's called Shrinking the Footprint, or it was when in 2012. And their reports from churches, and people in the church write a blog saying how they save water this way and how they save plastic bottles by going here. And, you know, every week they're wonderful pieces of information that you can share. I mean, it should become, and hopefully it will, a kind of thing that everybody just is doing now, so everybody feels their carbon footprints are gradually working down to a level that's sustainable.
Okay, I just want to pop it in the chat just in case people that left a little bit earlier, because obviously they'll get sent it. So if I put benchmarking data for churches available on request from the Church of England's Shaking the Footprint.
Shrinking the footprint.
Oh, shrinking,
I don't
sorry.
call that anymore. I'll have to send it to Alice, and then you can are you allowed to do that? What are you going to add some stuff at all? As I haven't got, there's more recent. I mean, the Eco Church is pretty good too. You look at the star churches, the ones that are gold, and they are doing very, very interesting things, encouraging people, sharing ideas, supporting people who have, you know, some particular difficulty. But the Church of England did that audit, and I assume they're still doing that. They're probably getting audits every year from churches, and we must do that. We need to carbon footprint our church now, and then see how we can improve it, because there's 3 levels of carbon footprint, and not just what you do, but the products that you buy, and whether you're flying and doing other things, business travel and things. So it's a very complicated thing, and it's something we should all get stuck into.
Well, I'll definitely add the Eco Church link to the follow-up email that we'll send out tomorrow. And if you find the other link, send it over.
I get them regularly, so I'll find that link.
Perfect. Wonderful. I think that's everything then. Are we going to wrap up and say goodbye?
Thank you for some good questions and for the opportunity to speak.
Oh, thank you for talking. Interesting as always.